The end of Ava's world crashed into him, a storm of rain-soaked silk and pure terror. She was bleeding, shaking, and hadn't felt like herself in years. The bar she had stumbled into was a place of shadows and secrets, smelling of old whiskey and quiet danger. It was the kind of place her husband, Donovan, would never have set foot in, and that alone was a small comfort. She hadn't been running to this specific bar, she had just been running. Away from the fancy penthouse apartment that was her gilded cage. Away from the smooth voice that whispered threats that felt like a knife's edge against her skin. Away from the man who owned her soul. Then she saw the bar's quiet neon sign, a small beacon in the storm of her fear. Her body, moving on instinct alone, carried her through its heavy wooden doors. She slammed into a wall of solid muscle, a man who didn't even sway from the impact. He simply absorbed her, his hands coming up to steady her arms. His touch was firm and grounding in the middle of her chaos. Ava looked up, gasping for breath, her vision blurred by tears and rain. She saw a face that looked like it was carved from shadow and discipline. He was Korean, with sharp, handsome features, and his dark eyes seemed to swallow the dim light in the room. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that looked more like a second skin than clothes. He didn't look surprised or alarmed by the sight of her, a disheveled woman in a torn and ruined evening gown. He just looked at her, his gaze steady and analytical. In that moment, Ava felt more truly seen than she had in 5 years of marriage. For the first time, she wasn't just a beautiful object or a symbol of her husband's success. She was a woman in terrible trouble, and this quiet, dangerous stranger was the first thing she had run to, not just from. Kang Daehyun guided her through the quiet bar, his hand a warm, steady pressure on the small of her back. The other customers, mostly men with hard eyes and women with tired smiles, looked away as they passed. It was a practiced, silent respect, the kind given to a man who held unseen power in this world of shadows. He led her to a deep leather booth in the farthest corner, a private space away from prying eyes. Ava collapsed into the seat, her body finally giving in to uncontrollable trembling as the adrenaline from her escape wore off, leaving her completely exhausted. Daehyun slid into the seat across from her, his movements smooth and precise. He didn't speak at first, simply watching her with a stillness that was the complete opposite of her frantic energy. A waiter appeared out of nowhere, placed a glass of water on the table, and then vanished back into the darkness. Daehyun slid the glass towards her. His first words were not a question, but a quiet command. "You're safe here." His voice was a low, smooth baritone that cut through the panic in her mind. Safe. The word felt like a foreign language she had forgotten how to speak. Safety with Donovan was just an act, a fragile illusion that depended on her being perfectly obedient. One wrong word, one look that lingered too long on another man, and the illusion would shatter. Just an hour ago, it had shattered for the last time. The memory was a fresh, painful wound. Donovan, his handsome face twisted into a mask of cold fury, had been enraged because she suggested they skip one of his meaningless charity parties. The public image of Donovan Hayes, the city's beloved philanthropist, had melted away, revealing the monster she knew so well. He hadn't hit her in the face, he never left marks where they would show. Instead, he had thrown a heavy glass remote control against the marble fireplace, the explosion of plastic and glass echoing the death of her last bit of hope. "You will go," he had hissed, his voice dangerously soft. "You will smile. You will be perfect." That is your only function in that moment. Something inside Ava that she thought was long dead finally broke free. She had simply turned, walked out of the room, taken the service elevator down, and run out into the rain with nothing but the clothes on her back. Now, sitting across from this silent, watchful stranger, that terror was still alive inside her, but for the first time, it was not alone. Ava stared at the man across from her, this anchor in her storm. She noticed the small details now, the way his stillness wasn't passive, but coiled with energy, like a panther ready to strike. A faint, silvery scar cut through his left eyebrow. A powerful authority radiated from him, commanding respect without a single word. This bar was his kingdom. She could feel it in the air. The bartender polished glasses, but his eyes never strayed far from their booth. The low murmur of conversation in the room seemed to bend around them, creating a small pocket of silence. This man was more than just a customer. He was the center of this small, dark universe. His gaze was still on her, patient and unwavering. She didn't see pity in his eyes, but a deep, unnerving understanding, as if he could see all the invisible bruises she carried. Finally, he spoke again, his question simple and direct. "Who are you running from?" For a terrifying second, Donovan's voice echoed in her head, whispering all his old threats. "No one will ever believe you. I own this city. If you ever leave, I will find you and you will beg me to kill you." Years of being broken down screamed at her to lie, to say nothing, to run from this man, too. But her instincts, the part of her that had carried her barefoot through the rain, told her something different. This man was dangerous, yes, but in a different way than Donovan. Donovan's danger was a poison that rotted you from the inside out. This man's danger felt like a fortress wall, deadly to his enemies, but a sanctuary to anyone he chose to protect. Her lips parted, and she finally found her voice, the name tasting like poison on her tongue. Donovan Hayes. She expected him to be confused or to not believe her. Donovan Hayes was a famous name, associated with charity and glowing magazine articles. But Daehyun did not look confused. A flicker of something cold and sharp passed through his eyes. It wasn't the recognition of a celebrity. It was something harder, something personal. His jaw tightened just slightly, a tiny movement that spoke volumes. He knew the name, or at least, he knew the type of man Donovan was, a powerful coward who built his empire on the broken pieces of other people. In that silent moment, Ava saw a decision being made in the depths of his eyes. He wasn't just offering her a drink and a safe place to rest for a moment. He was drawing a line in the sand, and Donovan Hayes was on the other side. Suddenly, a flicker of movement outside the bar's rain-streaked window caught Ava's eye. A black Bentley was cruising slowly down the street, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Her blood ran cold. It was one of his cars, the kind he used for his security team, men who were more like well-dressed jailers than bodyguards. They were already hunting for her. The breath caught in her throat, and a violent tremor shook her body. She instinctively tried to shrink into the shadows of the booth, a survival tactic she had perfected over the years. Daehyun didn't even glance at the car. His gaze remained locked on her, watching the raw terror bloom in her eyes. The calm authority around him sharpened into something far more dangerous. The air itself seemed to grow colder. With a smooth, unhurried motion, he took out his phone and made a call. He began to speak in rapid, low Korean. Ava couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the sound of absolute command, the voice of a powerful Korean mafia boss giving an order that would be followed without question. He hung up and placed the phone face down on the table. He turned his full attention back to her, his dark eyes looking directly into hers. "They will not find you," he said, his voice a low, resonant promise. It wasn't meant to be reassuring, it was a statement of fact. "They will not touch you again." And she believed him. The absolute certainty in his voice was like a shield, the first she'd had in a very long time. It pushed back against the memory of Donovan's seemingly endless power. She remembered a young journalist who had started looking into Donovan's shady business deals. Within a week, the journalist's career was ruined, his reputation destroyed by a series of anonymous, devastating leaks. Donovan had crushed the man's life with a few quiet phone calls and a placid smile. That was the man she had run from. But the man sitting across from her now felt like something else entirely. He felt like the kind of man who hunted monsters like Donovan. Daehyun rose from the booth with a silent grace. "Come," he said simply. Ava followed him without a second thought. He led her not through the front door, where Donovan's wolves were circling, but through a swinging door at the back of the bar and into a sterile, stainless steel kitchen. The staff moved with quiet efficiency, their heads bowed as Daehyun passed, parting for him like he was a king. He opened a heavy steel door at the far end, and they stepped out into a clean, narrow alley. A black SUV was waiting, its engine humming powerfully. A man in a dark suit opened the rear door for them. The interior of the vehicle was a fortress of leather and silence. As soon as the heavy door closed, all the sounds of the city disappeared. They drove through the glistening, neon-lit streets and arrived at a sleek, modern high-rise in a part of town she didn't recognize. A private elevator took them directly to the penthouse. The apartment was vast and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows that revealed a breathtaking, panoramic view of the entire city. It was another cage, but this one felt different. This one felt like a sanctuary. He led her to a guest suite. "You can rest here," he said, his voice softer now. "No one can reach you." He paused at the door, his gaze lingering on her for a moment, and then he was gone. For the first time in 5 years, she was truly alone, and no one was watching. Daehyun walked to the far end of his living room, looking out at the city. His mind drifted back 15 years, to his younger sister. She had fallen for a powerful man, a prosecutor with a charming smile and a fist of iron. Daehyun had been young then, just beginning to build his power, not yet the formidable mafia boss he was today. He hadn't seen the signs of abuse, and when he did, it was too late. The man had broken his sister, and when she finally tried to leave, he had made sure she couldn't. It was ruled a suicide. Daehyun knew better. That failure had forged him into the man he was today, a man of cold, lethal control. He would never be too late again. Ava was not just a woman in need, she was a ghost from his past, a chance to right a wrong that had haunted him for years. The next morning, Daehyun's grim prediction about Donovan began to come true. He led her to a small office, where a massive screen on the wall was playing a live news broadcast. And there was Donovan's face, looking worried and heartbroken for the cameras. He was giving a press conference, his voice breaking with fake sorrow as he spoke of Ava's fragile mental state and his desperate fear for her safety. He begged for her to come home so he could get her the help she so desperately needs. He was a master manipulator, turning public opinion into a weapon against her. The online comments were a flood of pity for him and cruel judgment for her. Ava felt the air leave her lungs. Donovan was erasing the real her and replacing her with a caricature of a crazy, ungrateful wife. He was destroying her reputation so that no one would ever believe her side of the story. She felt a presence beside her and looked up to see Daehyun standing there, his expression a mask of cold, controlled fury. He turned off the screen with a single click. "This is his first move," Daehyun said, his voice hard. "It is the move of a coward. He broadcasts your weakness because he is terrified of your strength." He turned to face her fully, his gaze intense. "He is not the only one with power, Ava." For the next hour, he laid out his world for her. He spoke of his organization, a network that operated in the shadows, far from the reach of men like Donovan. He showed her how his people were already creating a new identity for her, erasing her old life, and building a digital fortress around her. He was a king in a hidden kingdom, a powerful mafia boss, and Donovan Hayes was about to trespass in a place where his money and influence meant nothing. He was treating her not as a victim to be rescued, but as a partner in the war to come. The respect he showed her reignited the flickering ember of hope within her. That night, the nightmares came. She woke with a strangled cry, her heart hammering against her ribs. She scrambled out of bed and fled to the living area, needing to see the city lights to prove she wasn't back in Donovan's prison. She found Daehyun on the balcony, a dark silhouette against the glittering skyline. He must have heard her cry. She stopped a few feet away, shaking, and collapsed to the floor, finally letting out all the sobs she had held back for 5 long years. When the storm of tears finally passed, Daehyun knelt in front of her. "My sister," he said, his voice quiet and rough with old pain. She loved a man like him, a monster behind closed doors. I was not strong enough to save her then. It was a confession, a key to the deepest part of his heart. He wasn't just saving a stranger, he was trying to rewrite the ending to the story that haunted him. He reached out and gently took her foot. With infinite care, he began to clean and bandage the cuts on the soles of her feet from her desperate flight through the city. His hands were strong, hands capable of great violence, yet here they were, gently mending her. In that moment, Ava felt the first, true tendril of love begin to curl around her broken heart. 2 days later, a soft alarm from Daehyun's phone broke the morning stillness. He looked at the screen, and his face hardened into granite. "He found us," he said. "Not this building, but the area." He's flooding it with his men, going door to door with your picture. They had to leave immediately. They took the service elevator down to the parking garage, where the black SUV was waiting. As they pulled out into the street, Ava saw them, men in dark suits holding her photo. One of them locked eyes with their vehicle for a second too long. Another car pulled out behind them, and the chase began. The driver expertly navigated the city streets, while Daehyun remained perfectly calm. He reached across the seat and took her hand, his grip strong and unwavering. "They will not get to you," he promised again. The SUV swerved into a dark, dead-end alley. A heavy steel loading bay door rumbled open, and they drove inside, into a vast, dark warehouse. The door slammed shut behind them, trapping their pursuers outside. Lights flickered on, revealing a dozen of Daehyun's men, all armed and ready. They hadn't run into a trap, they had led the hunters into one. This was the raw, undeniable power of a Korean mafia boss on his home turf. Daehyun walked to a laptop and typed a few commands. He sent a text message to the lead pursuer outside. It was a satellite photo of the man's own house, with a red circle around his daughter's bedroom window. The next message was simple: "Go home." The man's face went pale with terror. Within seconds, he and his partner were gone. The threat was over, ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, surgical strike of information and fear. Daehyun led her up a flight of metal stairs to a loft overlooking the warehouse floor. It was a safe haven, carved from the heart of his dangerous world. She turned to him, overwhelmed with emotion. "You keep saying you'll keep me safe," she began, her voice trembling but clear. "But you're doing more than that. You're not hiding me. You're fighting for me." He looked at her, seeing the fierce, resilient woman she was becoming. Slowly, he raised his hand, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. "Donovan Hayes took everything from you," Daehyun said, his voice a low, intense whisper. "Your voice. Your freedom. Your name. I am not just going to keep you safe from him, Ava. I am going to help you take it all back." It was a vow, an oath sworn in a cathedral of steel and shadows. It was the beginning of a war, but for the first time in her life, she felt the breathtaking possibility of winning.